Welcome to episode 15 of the Stitch Create Love podcast. My name is Lindsay and I'm coming to you from Cheshire in the northwest of the UK, where I live with my husband and our 5-year-old daughter. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry and Etsy as Stitch Create Love, and I will pop links to all of those places in the description box below, and I will pop some details somewhere on the screen in all of this white space that I've got today, with a nice shadow here because I'm sure the light's going to do something weird as well, but we'll see how we get on. Welcome if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. It's lovely to have you with me. I hope that you're staying safe and well, and I hope that you've been managing to fit some crafting into your life. And if you are a new viewer, then welcome. It's lovely to have you with me. This is a podcast all about my crafting and the creative side of my life, and you will occasionally find some knitting and sewing tutorials on this channel as well. And that's something that I'm keen to develop as we go forward. So if you do enjoy this episode, then you can always like and subscribe, and then you'll keep up to date with future videos on the channel. Today is Monday the 16th of November, and it has been a few weeks since my last episode. And I'm going to be completely honest, I just haven't really felt like filming a podcast or doing much of anything really in terms of social media. I've been a lot kind of quieter on Instagram. I have been busy with designs and different things, but to be honest, I've been struggling quite a lot with my mental health over the last few weeks, and I'm not saying this to kind of, to look for sympathy or, to have everybody worry or anything like that, but I was very, very clear when I started the podcast and as I've gone along that I want to be completely honest about my life and the way that I'm feeling really. So I have been struggling a little bit. I've made some notes here. I don't know whether it's the time of year or whether, we're in lockdown here again in the UK, or whether it's hormonal, or it could be any number of things. I do take a very mild dose of an antidepressant for low mood and anxiety, and I don't know whether perhaps that's something that needs to be looked at again, because I am on a slightly different one at the moment and haven't been taking it for that long. So yeah, I might kind of get in touch with my GP about that. But I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of us are feeling like that at the moment, and I think it's probably just a combination of a lot of different things. And I'm fine, and I've got, the support of my husband, and, I have the support of my friends and family, and so I am fine, but it has meant that I haven't really felt like engaging very much in terms of filming a podcast or on social media, because these things can manifest themselves very differently in all of us because we're all different people. But for me, it makes me feel like almost like I just want to crawl under a rock and kind of curl up and not have anybody, look at me. It affects my confidence, and it makes me feel, in terms of kind of the social media side of things, I don't know how you would describe it really. In the world of business, it would be called imposter syndrome. Feeling like you don't belong in that community, that everybody else doesn't want you there or something like that. So I have been feeling a little bit like that, and it makes me feel quite vulnerable as well. And putting yourself out there when you're feeling vulnerable is quite a big thing to do. So I have been a little bit quiet on social media, and I am fine. Please don't worry about me. Not that you would anyway, you've probably got much better, more important things to be doing with your time. But I wanted to be honest about why I haven't filmed a podcast. But I have got a lot of things to talk about, and I'm in quite a chatty mood today. So I've given this episode the title, Let's Chat. It is going to be a very chatty episode. I have no idea how long or short it's going to be. I always start off by saying this is going to be a long one or this is going to be a short one. Well, I don't don't know how long or short it's going to be today, but I have got a lot of things to talk about, and I think it is going to be quite chatty. So get yourself a cup of tea and your knitting or your crochet or any other craft that you want to bring along. I have a cup of tea here. I am drinking a cup of Twinings Digest tea, which I've only discovered recently. It's got spearmint and apple and a few other things in. It's very nice. And the mug, actually, that I've got this in today, this is a mug that Eloise painted when she was 1. For her first birthday, we went to Center Parks with my brother and sister-in-law. Center Parks, for those of you who don't know, it's like a holiday village in a forest, and there's loads of activities that you can do, kind of forestry-based activities as well as indoor activities. So for her first birthday, we went there, and then one of the activities that you could do was pottery painting, and this was her. She started off just kind of dabbing it on and then went a little bit crazy. So yeah, that's the mug that I'm using for my tea today. So, as I say, I have got a lot to talk to you about, and I have kind of put it all into the new format that we talked about last time, and I've tried to give sections a bit of a more interesting name, but we'll see how we go. So first up, in fact, no, before I go into it, I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about projects. I'm going to talk about what's on my mind, which is not... I've told you all about how I'm feeling, but it's going to be more of a kind of a talk topic, if you like. So we'll have a chat. I'm going to do some sharing the love. The ask a question is going to be a question that I'd like to ask you this time. I've also got some prizes to give out, and then I dare say there'll be some other stuff at the end. So let's get started with projects, shall we? And the kind of theme that's running through all of the projects that I'm going to talk to you about today is making things for other people versus making things for yourself, which I think is quite relevant at this time of year, isn't it? Because a lot of us are probably making gifts for Christmas for people. I've got the Christmas gifts make along running with Angela from Knitting on the Farm at the moment, and I know I've seen lots of you putting really lovely finished objects and different projects in there. So this is a time of year when we tend to make things for other people, and I just, having worked on projects for myself and having worked on projects for other people over the last few weeks, it's kind of led me to reflect a little bit about my attitude and my approach to making projects for other people versus making projects for myself. So instead of me just waffling, let's show you some actual projects, shall we? So the first thing that I'm going to show you, it's actually a finished object. So this is the Dandelion Hat, which is a pattern, a paid for pattern by Anna Dervout, who is Along Avec Anna. I'm sure you all know her. She's a very lovely French lady who is, I think, currently living in the UK, and she has some young children as well. So this is the Dandelion Hat. Now I think the Dandelion collection of patterns, because I think she's got a cardigan and a jumper as well, it was one of the first design collections that she released, and you can see here it's got this really pretty stitch pattern here. This is the Dandelion stitch pattern, and it's actually a lot simpler to do than you may first think, and there are tutorials online that you can use to help you along as well. The first time I did it, it was a little bit fiddly, just from the point of view of, if you're a knitter, you tend to hold your needles in a certain way, and you tend to manipulate your yarn in a very particular way, and obviously when you're making a stitch like this, it's slightly different. So it was a little bit fiddly to start with, but this is classic me, this project. So I started this project in September, and this was a project that I knitted on in the car when we were on the way to the Lake District when we went on holiday, and I knitted the ribbing, and then I think I got up to about here on the way in the car on the way to the Lake District, because apart from the rows where you're actually doing the dandelion stitch, it is just knitting round, so it was really nice car knitting to be able to do. So I think I probably got up to about here, and then I just left it sitting in the project bag until Friday. So today is Monday, so until Friday. And then on Friday I picked it up and I finished the whole thing. So it had been sat there for ages, and it just took me an evening to finish it. So I mean, I think we're all like that, aren't we? But anyway, I did finish it. And the reason that I wanted to make a hat for Eloise is because she has quite a large head circumference, and I do struggle to find hats that fit her. When I've bought hats before, or when she's had hats as gifts from people, they either come up too short and they don't cover her ears, and she does tend to suffer a little bit with her ears in the winter, or they're just too tight. And they don't really fit around her head properly. I will pop it on. I look ridiculous in a hat. It's the medium size from the pattern that I made. I look ridiculous in a hat, but you can see it. You know, it fits me, and it fits her. So she has got quite a large head. The pom-pom, she chose, her favourite colour is purple, and you can see that we've got purple and pink speckles in the yarn. I'll talk to you about the yarn in a minute. The pom-pom, she chose the colour for, this is just some purple acrylic yarn that I had in my stash, and I used a pom-pom maker that I bought about a year ago from Hobbycraft. It was a set of 4 different pom-pom makers. So there's a really small one, look at that now. There's a really small one, and then they go up in size. And I think I used the next to largest one to do this for her. And that was really nice because we could do that together, wrapping the yarn around the pom-pom maker. And then obviously I did the cutting, and I've just trimmed it down a little bit, although it could do with being trimmed a little bit more. And it's nice having the pom-pom on there because it is a little tiny bit baggy at the top. For her, because of course she is a child and this is an adult size hat, but the pom-pom, the weight of the pom-pom at the back just kind of makes it all stay on her head and not fall down over her eyes, so that's really nice. The yarn that I have used, it is just an acrylic yarn, and it was from Hobbycraft, and it was their Women's Institute acrylic yarn. It's a DK weight yarn, and it's just in a kind of a creamy whitey colour, and then it's speckled with this sort of almost like a shocking pink and a purple. And I bought this in the sale for about £1 something about a year ago, and I used basically all of a 50-gram ball that I had, and it is acrylic, and I think there is definitely a place for acrylic yarn within knitting, and I tend to use acrylic when I make things for Eloise because I can just throw them in the washing machine. And let's be honest, a white hat on a 5-year-old child who likes to ride her bike and jump in muddy puddles and do all of the other things that children like to do and get really mucky, it's going to need to be washed in the washing machine. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased with that. The pom-pom I've just attached. So when you make a pom-pom, I'm sure you all know, but if you've never made a pom-pom before, you basically wrap your yarn around and around and around, and then you cut the outside layer and you tie a length of yarn around the middle, and then you end up with 2 tails. So what I did was I threaded the 2 tails through to the inside of the hat, and then I've just woven them in there on the inside. So yeah, a really lovely pattern, much simpler than you would think in terms of, apart from the actual stitch, the dandelion stitch itself, which you make over 2 rounds. It is a lot of just knitting, so it's yeah, it's a lot simpler than you might think. I'm sorry the light is kind of blowing out on that a little bit. That's better, isn't it? So yeah, I would recommend the pattern, and although it's taken me a couple of months to finish, it is actually a really quick knit, because as I said, it was on the way to the Lake District in the car, so probably with stop-offs and things that was about 3 hours, and then an evening. So really nice and quick knit. So that's the first project that I have been making for someone else, and I'll show you the next one, and then I'll talk about kind of differing attitudes towards making things for other people. So I'm not going to say who this one's for, because it is for a friend, in case they're watching, but this is going to be a Christmas gift for a friend of mine, and let's have a look. So I showed you this last time. This is the Medley Shawl, and it's a pattern by Libby Jonson, who is truly Myrtle. And at the moment, you can only get this pattern if you are a member of her Wardrobe Toolbox monthly subscription service. I'm sorry about the sun, but I'm not actually showing you anything at the moment, so let's just go with it. And you're probably not actually looking at me anyway. You're probably looking at your knitting or whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, so you can only get it if you're a member of her Wardrobe Toolbox monthly subscription service. But I know that she is planning to release the patterns that she kind of offers as part of that subscription service about 12 months later than they're given to those people. So I understand that this pattern will be released next year, so you will be able to get it. So it's a shawl. Let me just take my row counter off so I'm not dropping everything all over the place. It's a shawl that starts at the bottom tip here. So you start at the bottom and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you go all the way up, and then you end up with this lace section, and then you come to the other end and you decrease down. So it's symmetrical really. And although this might look incredibly complicated, it is actually mosaic knitting. So it's all slip stitches in the colour work. It needs blocking because it's got like a garter edge here, and obviously that's just rolling back in at the moment. So if I can open it out a little bit, you can see it's going to kind of be more like that. It really does need to be blocked. And then once you finished the colour work section, I think she calls this the tweedy section, you end up going into a nice stripe here, and then you've got some lace, which again you won't be able to see terribly well because it's not blocked yet. Let me see if I can hold that up for you. There you go, that's slightly better. So this is like a diamond lace pattern, and again it's a fairly simple lace pattern to do, and on every other row you're basically purling anyway because this is knit flat. And then you've got these alternating stripes between. So it takes 3 different colours to use, and I will show you the yarns that I'm using in a minute. So I'm now on to the decreasing section. So it should come together fairly quickly now. It took a lot less time to do this section than it has done to do these sections, and I did make a little mistake somewhere, which we won't talk about. However, this is a very good way to explain my differing attitude to projects where I'm making things for myself versus where I'm making things for other people. Now, I chose the yarns for this project. I chose 2 different greys. So this is Drops Flora. The reason that I chose Drops Flora is because I wanted to start working a little bit more with natural fibres, because I haven't really used natural fibres very much within my knitting. I started off very much as an acrylic knitter, which I still use and I still love, and there is definitely still a place for acrylic yarn within my knitting and my crochet and other kind of crafting. But I wanted to just try using natural fibres because I hadn't really used them before, so I didn't really know how they behaved. I think that my gauge is definitely affected depending on the different fibre that I'm using. Acrylic yarn is very forgiving, I feel. I mean, this is acrylic yarn that I knitted this sweater in, and it is very forgiving because you can pop it in the washing machine. You don't really need to block it. So yeah, I think I just, for me, using the natural fibres is something that was going to extend my knitting skills a little bit, because it was going to make me have to be more careful. It was going to mean that I'd have to start swatching things. So I wanted to use some natural fibres. And because I still don't class myself as a particularly experienced knitter, I didn't want to go spending a massive amount of money on natural fibres, because you know it's quite a substantial shawl. If you were using hand-dyed yarn for this, it would take 3 skeins, so it's, you know, it takes a lot of yarn. And so I decided I was going to use Drops because, as I'm sure everybody knows, Drops is a really good kind of budget option if you want to use natural fibres. I'm sure they probably do have acrylic within their collection, but anyway, so Drops Flora is what I'm using. So for the tweedy section, I chose the 2 different greys. So I've got the dark grey, no, sorry, it's not dark grey, this is medium grey, I think, and this is light grey. I probably still have the band for that in the bag, so I will find that in a minute. So yeah, this is colour 03, so that is light grey, and then I've got ball bands here, and I've got colour 04, which I assume is this one. Yes, so I think that is medium grey because the dark grey must be 05. So 03 light grey, 04 medium grey or mid grey. And then the other colour that I chose is this one, which is colour 11, and that's called Petrol Mix. And I chose these colours online. Incidentally, I have tended to buy a lot of my commercial yarn from Wool Warehouse, and I use them quite a lot, but there is another website that I have now been using for my drops yarn, and it's called Purple Sheep Yarns, and I'll pop a link in the description box below. And the reason that I started using them is because I find when you look at the colours, the photographs of the different shades on the Wool Warehouse website, they're not always terribly true to life. But when you go on the Purple Sheep Yarns website, I think the first time I got yarn from them, it was because I wanted a colour that was out of stock on Wool Warehouse, so I ended up buying from them. And actually, when the yarn arrived, the colour, the photographs, okay, stop waffling. The photographs online of the shades that I have chosen were much more true to life, so I do tend to go to them now because I think I know much more what I'm getting. So anyway, I chose these colours on the Purple Sheep website, and I chose them because I thought the grey was a really nice neutral that would pretty much go with anything, and this is one of my favourite colours, but the person that I'm knitting it for I know is one of their favourite colours as well. So I chose all those, so it was specifically for her that I chose all the yarns. But as I'm going through it, I'm constantly questioning, oh my goodness, is she going to like this? Is she going to want to wear it? And using a natural fibre obviously produces a certain effect. The content of this yarn is, let me tell you, 65% wool and 35% alpaca. Now, I am a fan of alpaca because alpaca is very, very warm, but it does have, which you can't really see in the ball, but maybe if I hold it up there, it does have a slight halo. Can you see there? Can you see the slight halo just coming from there? And I quite like that because it makes me feel kind of warm and cozy, and you know you've got a natural fibre, you know you've got something that's going to keep you really warm. But I'm just, yeah, as I'm knitting it, I'm constantly questioning, oh, is she going to like it? So although I have enjoyed it, it's been a lovely knit because the pattern is very well written and it's very well explained. That's not a right way to say something, is it? Because the pattern is very well written, because it's easy to knit, because the instructions are very clear. I've enjoyed knitting it, and I've certainly enjoyed extending my skills in terms of all this colour work. But I've actually found it a little bit stressful because I'm thinking, oh no, is she gonna like this? And this is a Christmas gift, so I want to make sure that, you know, she is going to like it. But I think that's the difference, isn't it? If you're knitting something for yourself and you're not 100% sure about something, you think, oh, I'll just carry on anyway because, you know, it's for me and I'll wear it. Or you think, no, I'm not going to carry on and I'm going to make a decision the other way. And without actually taking it to the person that it's for and saying, do you like this? I'm not going to know. So it's been a bit stressful in that regard. I know that she will very definitely recognise and appreciate the hours and hours of work that has gone into it. So I'm sure she will like it, and it will be warm. But yeah, it's a slightly different attitude we have, isn't it, to knitting for other people. So that is my Medley shawl, and I'm using 4mm needles, which are this, you won't be able to see that, but it says pony, so I've just got pony 4mm there. I bought loads of these when I first got back into knitting because they're really affordable, and because they're aluminium, they're quite kind of slippy. And that's just my row counter, so let's pop that back on so that I know what I am doing. And then I will pop everything back into the bag, and then I will talk to you about the third project for someone else that I am knitting. I'm getting all confused now because I've got this much left of my light grey before I change, and I've already changed into this one. And actually I won't be using any more of the petrol colour, and I've only used a little teeny tiny bit of the second ball that I bought of that, because these are 50-gram balls, so I'll be able to use that in another project. Right, let's just get this back in here. You would think, wouldn't you, that after 15 episodes and 11 months of podcasting, I'd know what I'm doing. But anyway. Right, okay, so the next project that I am working on for someone else is a pair of socks. And it is a pair of socks for my husband. Now, this is a really significant project for me. Should I move over here somewhere? I don't know whether that's the right way to describe it. Let me have a slurp of my tea. Yeah, it's a significant, important, special project for me, and not just because it's for my husband and it's a gift, although he does know about it. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But I remember 2 years ago, about this time 2 years ago, I'd not been back into knitting for very long. I'd not done very much. I'd not completed any projects, really. I was just sort of playing about with what I could do. And I started watching podcasts. And everybody that I was watching seemed to be knitting socks. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, do you know what? I would love it so much if I could knit a pair of socks for Stephen for Christmas. And, you know, that was never going to happen that year. But it was something that I wanted to do then. And I've always wanted to do that since. And so it's a significant project for me because now I'm actually able to do that. And I have the confidence to work on it and kind of measure it as I go with him. So I have been asked actually by a friend if I would knit a pair of socks as a gift for somebody for Christmas, and I said no, although I didn't say no, but having had a discussion we sort of agreed that it probably wasn't sensible, because unless I can try the socks on somebody that's not me as I go, I think I'd find it really difficult to get the fit right, because we're all different, aren't we? We've all got different widths of feet and lengths of feet, and anyway, so he does know about these because I'm measuring these as I go. I am not using a pattern. I'm writing down what I do as I go in my little notebook, which was sent to me by the lovely Sarah, who has the Yarn Mugs podcast. I can't speak today. It was sent to me by the lovely Sarah, who has the Yarn Mugs podcast with some minis, and so that's where I'm writing down what I've done so far, and I may or may not release this as a pattern. We'll see how we go. So let me show you what I've done so far. So I prefer to do contrast heels, toes and cuffs on my socks, because it means that I can get 2 pairs of socks out of 100 gram skein of hand-dyed yarn. So I've done the toes, which you probably can't really see any detail on because it's a dark yarn, and then I've just done 2 rounds in the colour that I'm going to be using, which I will hold up for you in a minute. Now, the yarn that I'm using for my contrast, it's a Drops yarn again, and it's Drops Nord. And Drops Nord is 45% alpaca, 25% wool and 30% polyamide or nylon, effectively. So it's their fingering weight sock yarn. And I didn't buy this, the Nord, with the intention of using it for these socks. I bought this with the intention of using it for something else, which I will talk to you about later, because I bought plenty of it. But when I picked out the yarn, the main colour of yarn that I wanted to use for the socks, I didn't really have anything that went with it, because my yarn stash is quite feminine, I suppose, because I buy things that I like to make things for myself. So I didn't have anything particularly masculine within my kind of selection of minis that I could use for the contrast heel, toes and cuffs. So the yarn that I'm using for the socks is this one here, and it is a Sherry Iris yarn, and I will find the ball band. Put everything down on top of the bag now, honestly. It's a Sherry Iris yarn, and it is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it is a Country Garden Christmas. Now, this yarn I bought on eBay a little while ago, probably about 18 months ago, something like that, because I was just, when I was first kind of starting to buy hand-dyed yarn, I just put in a search on eBay, you know, hand-dyed sock yarn or whatever, and this came up. So I bought this on eBay, So it was originally a sock set. There was a 100-gram skein and a 20-gram skein. So the 20-gram skein wasn't with it, but the 100-gram skein was. So the set was called A Country Garden Christmas. And it's got really lovely kind of autumnal / wintry garden tones in it, as you would expect from the name of the yarn. So I've balled it up into 2 balls because I knit my socks 2 at a time, and that is what I'm going to use for the main body of the sock. Now, I had contemplated just doing a vanilla sock because it's always handy, isn't it, to have something that you can just knit on. But what I think I'm going to try and do is, because it will give a little bit of kind of stretch and flexibility across the front, is I think I'm going to put some kind of ribbing across the front, and then as I go up I'm going to twist. I'm going to use a twist stitch, I think, to make like a mock cable, because I have used a mock cable in another pattern which I will tell you about in a minute. So that's my thought. I've got 72 stitches, so let me tell you what I did. I cast on 24 stitches, so 12 per needle, and then I did the toe by just alternating increases every other row. Honestly, that didn't make sense, did it? I knit the toe by making increases at either end of every other row. I think that makes more sense, until I got to 72 stitches. Then I knitted 4 rows, I think. Yeah, and then I joined in my next yarn, and I've just knitted 2 rounds of that. So I'm thinking that across the front I'm going to have just some plain stockinette for a little bit, and then I will do some kind of ribbing. I'm thinking maybe a 2 by 2 to have the ribbing going up, and then maybe twisting, but we'll see how that goes. And as I say, I will write down everything that I do, and I may or may not release it as a pattern. But again, with this being for somebody else, I'm not quite as stressed about this, because obviously I can check with him, do you like this? And he's happy with the colours that I've chosen. And I can try it on for size as I'm going, which I think will help me a lot with my knitting as well. But I think I'm a lot more picky about it. I want it to be perfect. I don't want it to be, you know, sometimes when you're knitting, particularly with socks, you get to the point where, you know, the yarn might split a little bit, or one of your stitches isn't quite looking right, it looks a bit loose. Well, that happened a couple of times on the toe, and I actually went back and undid it and did it right, because it's for somebody else. Whereas if it had been for me, I just wouldn't have cared, really. So yeah, those are my socks. And the progress keepers that I've got, that's from Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit Yarns. And this one is from, I think might even be the wrong way around, but this is from Shannon at Blue Fern Yarns, and I'll talk a little bit more about her later, because I have some yarn to show you. So yeah, those are my socks for Stephen. So those are the socks that those are the projects that I am working on for other people, not the socks that I'm working on for other people. I've only got 1 pair of socks. Yeah, I'm just going to stop recording because I've been talking for a long time and my camera will stop. So I'm going to stop it anyway and then restart. Okay, so we're back again. Maybe talking quicker would be a good idea. Okay, so those were my projects for other people, and now I'm having to take my socks off to show you the projects for myself. I'm not going to show you all of the projects that I'm doing for myself, and I've actually got a planned project to talk to you about as well, but I will show you socks. I will show you the socks that I have finished for myself, and incidentally this is my next pattern that I am going to release. They're actually looking a bit big on the blockers now because they've been on my feet. What I'm doing is I'm hiding the mistake. I'll show you the mistake in a minute. So here we go. My feet are clearly bigger than the sock blockers. So these are my seasonal fruits socks, and this pattern will be released this week at some point. Basically, I've taken the photographs of them, so I'm now allowed to wear them. But I haven't put the photographs into the pattern, and I need to just write the Ravelry listing and the Etsy listing and add the pattern online. And I think I'm going to offer like an introductory discount for the first few days when it's released, because I offered a discount, a Friday the 13th discount on my existing patterns. So I just thought, you know, to kind of make it equal, I'll offer a discount for the first few days on this pattern. So this is, as I say, the seasonal fruit socks. Let's talk to you about the yarn first of all. So the heels, toes and cuffs is a mini skein, the colour of which I'm afraid I don't know, from Michelle at Wild Rose Yarns, because I don't know the colour because I was given it in a swap. And the main colour, which I think is so clever because it almost seems to have micro striped up here, is from lovely Claire at Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit Yarns, and it was called Paint Box Garden. Yes, so that is the yarns that I have used. And again, I think I used 50 grams exactly of this yarn. I've written it down somewhere. I'll have to maybe check that. But yes, so I can get 2 pairs of socks out of the 100 gram skein. Let me just pop the other one on the blocker slightly differently, because it has a pattern up the middle which it's a little bit difficult for you to see looking at them side on. So here is the stitch pattern. So this is a mock cable, and the story behind the pattern is that this yarn reminded me of Peaches and Cream, and I thought, could I have a sock with stitch pattern going up the front that was like little peaches? And so this is what we have. So this is a mock cable design here. Then we've got some lace, which is, it reminds me of like a basket weave. So it was almost like the little fruit sitting in the basket. And then you've got here, because there's a pearl stitch here, you've got a little bit of, it's not ribbing, but you've got like a pearl channel. I should be able to describe these things better, shouldn't I? But anyway, and it looks, I will agree, if this is what you think, that this looks like quite a complicated stitch pattern, but it's not. It is an 8-row repeat, and I think, I can't remember exactly how many stitches it goes across now, but it doesn't go across the whole of the front. You can see there's still a little bit of stockinette or stocking stitch there. So you've only got your stitch pattern here, and then on the back it's just plain knit, 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 knit. We shouldn't say that, should we? Because it is just plain knit, 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 but because I've used really nice yarn, it doesn't look plain at all. And actually, the stitch pattern repeat itself, the rows are pretty similar, except for the one that you make the mock cable on. And there is a tutorial which is linked as part of the pattern for how to do that stitch. So I would not say that this is a pattern that a beginner couldn't do. Awful, what is wrong with me today? If you are a relative beginner to sock knitting, I would not discourage you from trying it. I would encourage you to give it a go. What I would also say about these is, because you've got the lace and you've got the pearl kind of ridge here, they do stretch quite a lot. So if you are quite a new sock knitter, it will be easier from a fit point of view. I normally do a high instep adjustment. It's just a bit of pilling here where I've been wearing them in my shoes. I would normally do a high instep adjustment. Again, instructions for which are given in the pattern, when I'm doing my heel, but for these I didn't, because I knew that this was going to give me quite a lot of stretch. So yeah, again, quite forgiving in terms of the fit. Now, what I was saying about being more or less picky when you're knitting things for yourself versus when you're knitting them for other people, when I photograph these socks for the pattern, I've put them on the blockers, or I've had them photographing the whole pattern down here, because if I pop my hand in here, can you see the mistake? I had an absolute nightmare with these socks. This is a knitting confession here for you. So I was using a Knit Pro Basics 2.25mm 100 centimetre cable needle. Is it 100 centimetre cable, or is the whole thing 100 centimetres? Anyway, I was doing that 2 at a time magic loop. And I don't know whether it's because I've been feeling stressed lately, but I I must have really been, you know, putting these needles under pressure. And I've thrown it in the bin now, so I can't show you, but I did take a photograph. Maybe I'll pop a photograph in here. The needle just broke. And it was at this point where I made my mistake that the needle broke. And so my stitches, just like my live stitches, started to just fall away. So I picked them up as best I could. Thankfully, a lot of them were just on the stockinette section, so that was quite easy for me to just get a crochet hook and put it all back together. But for the life of me, on this lace section here, I couldn't make that work. So I have a mistake there. I also have a mistake in exactly the same place on this one, which I don't know if, yeah, you can see it there. It's much easier to see mistakes on camera, whether it's in a photograph or on a screen, than it is to see them in real life. So yeah, you can see that there in exactly the same place because I had to pick them up. So what I ended up doing was I had to order a new needle, and I thought, do you know what, I'm sick of this because I have broken a few different, what I would call cheaper needles before. So I thought I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm going to order some Chiagu. So this is a Chiagu, is that how you say it? Chiagu? Red lace circular, 100 centimetres, and that is what these socks are on now. Oh my goodness, I love these needles. What I love about them is that they are strong. I don't get the sense that I could bend those easily. The join is very, very smooth, so you're not snagging anything, and it's very easy to move them along. The cable is just lovely. It just slides. I'm not putting any effort into that whatsoever. It's really, really lovely. And the cable, I'm not sure what it's made from actually, and you're probably not going to be able to see this at all. Let's have a go. No, you won't be able to see it. But if you run your fingers across it, it's almost ever so slightly textured. And so whatever it's made from, it doesn't have a memory. So, you know, often with your needles, you end up with things twisting and distorting a little bit, and then you're trying to get everything to be smooth. That doesn't happen with these. I would really, really recommend these needles. They are not cheap. I think they're about £10 a pair. But as and when I invest in new needles from now on, I think I'm going to go for the Chiagu, and I'm certainly going to go for the Chiagu for socks. I've got this one for now. I don't need another one, unless I want to knit another pair of socks, but we'll see. So yeah, I ordered a new needle, but in the interim, whilst I was waiting for this new needle, I had to make do with what I had. So these needles have been knitted on, these socks have been knitted on magic loop and on DPNs and on short circulars. Actually, one of them's been knitted on magic loop and short circulars, and the other one's been knitted on magic loop and DPNs, and then the Chiagus arrived, so I finished them off on that. But what I wanted to show you is this the one that I used for the, yes it is. This is the one that I finished off on a short circular. And can you see there, the laddering down the side? Because I didn't have my stitches split quite right. So I've got laddering here from the short circular that I used. The short circular that I used was this one. This is a higher sharp 2.25mm short circular. I absolutely hated it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these needles. Higher sharps are very good needles, and if this is how you knit your socks, then they're very, very good needles. However, and in fact one of my test knitters, Ruth, I know she knits all of her socks on short circulars. I don't think it's these particular ones that she uses. Higher sharps are very, very sharp. So for a start, every time I was pushing through, I was hurting my finger, because as a rule, I'm not somebody that pushes the needles through, but because these are so short and the actual needle itself is so short, I was having to do this a lot. So it really hurt my finger. And the other thing is that they're very, very difficult to hold. So I found this much, much slower. And because the whole thing was just, I didn't feel like I had much control over it, to be honest. And I think that's why I've ended up with the laddering, because I wasn't able to just pull it quite as tight as I would have liked to have done. So that was my my journey on the short circulars. So yeah, I'm not a fan. that's how I knit my first pair of socks, because I thought it was going to be the easiest option, and it was as a beginner sock knitter. But having now tried other things, I just can't get on with those at all. If anybody wants one, you're welcome to it. Right, the other thing that I then went on to was DPN. So I had these. So I split, first of all, I split my stitches over 2 needles. So I had a front and a back, but I found that that was quite difficult to maneuver and manipulate. So I then split it into 3, so that I could continue to knit round, which was easier. But these are quite long DPNs. And so as I was knitting with them, I was finding that they were rubbing here, my finger, because I was holding them like this. Now, when I use these are shorter. If I just show you, so I'll pop the DPN. So they're a lot shorter. So when I knit with these, I tend to be holding it more sort of lower down, and I don't have, you know, I have the cable under these 2 fingers here. But because everything was really rigid, I've lost my other DPN now. Anyway, because everything was really rigid here, I ended up with this needle rubbing here, and I ended up with like a little blister here, and I had to put plaster on it. So yeah, I dare say if I was using a shorter DPN, it would have been better. But anyway, the point that I was going to make to you is that it has absolutely 100%, here's my other needle, convinced me that my preferred method of sock knitting is magic loop. And I know a lot of people don't like using magic loop because you have to pull out the back needle all the time when you've finished knitting to go on to the next, whether it's the front or the back of the sock. But yeah, they were okay. And I would, you know, for emergencies, that's fine. And I use DPNs for other things, and I don't know whether they're shorter or whether it's just the way I'm holding it. Maybe I'm less tense, I don't know. But definitely my preferred method is magic loop, and my preferred needles are the Chai-Goos. So anyway, those are my socks, and the mistakes are there, and I'm not faffing about trying to correct them because they're just for me, and I will wear them, and I have been wearing them very happily. They are a lovely fit, and as I say, that pattern, look at the state of this now, that pattern will be released at some point this week. And what I would just say about that is, although I designed them to be fruit, one of my test knitters, Ruth again, oh, Ruth, this is the Ruth episode. She actually used like a sort of a red colour, and it really reminded me of Christmas tree baubles. So completely by fluke, they'd be quite good as Christmas socks if you would like to have a go at those. So yeah, they'll be out later this week, and I will post on Instagram when they are done. So those are my socks for myself, which I'm a lot less fussy about and a lot more sloppy about, clearly. I'm just going to pop everything back into this bag, otherwise everything's going to get lost. Now, I have a number of other projects that I'm working on for myself, and I'm not going to show you my molten shawl because I haven't made any progress on it since last time. I'm on the lace, and it just requires a little bit of time and concentration to sit down and do, and I haven't been in the right frame of mind to do that, so that's on hold. I have, however, started another shawl because, you know, I think I said last time I can't possibly justify casting on another shawl until I finish one of the shawls I'm doing. Yeah, right. So anyway, but I suppose I could blame Angela for this. But no, I don't want to blame Angela for anything because Angela's so lovely. And Angela from the Knitting on the Farm podcast decided, I think she might have decided actually after watching my last episode, but she decided that she wanted to knit the Siren song shawl. And this is not her fault at all, because I then said to Angela, would you like to knit it together? Because I was going to cast it on, and she said, yep, that'll be lovely. So anyway, we agreed that we were going to cast it on last week. So I've only done a little tiny bit on this, but I just wanted to show you what I have done. So I've cast it on, and which is the correct side. Where's my working yarn? Yeah, there. So I'm on the right side row. Here we go. So that's all I've done so far. And the reason that I wanted to show you this one is because it's new and you haven't seen it before. It doesn't look very exciting at the moment. The yarn I'm using is Mr. B yarns, and this is the Merlin colourway. And the contrast colour that I'm going to use is this one, which is the Scuba colourway. I keep putting this in this bag and getting bits all over it, honestly. Anyway, that's the Scuba colourway. So they're going to contrast with each other, and you can see that you've got the lovely speckles within this yarn that kind of goes with that. So I think that's going to be beautiful. But, aha, now, there's all my stitch markers, honestly. Can you see? You don't need to see them. But anyway, these are all the stitch markers that I was using for my socks. They're just ones that I've made and put together. And I was looking for them to use on my new socks, and I couldn't find them, and it's because I've just very carelessly popped them in the wrong bag. There's a little bee, and then these two are the same. They're just a little nugget, a pearl nugget there. Anyway, yeah, so the reason that I wanted to mention this to you was I think there is a bit of a danger sometimes, particularly at this time of year when you're creating gifts for people, to not put as much, not so much as much thought and effort into the knitting that you're doing for yourself. You're certainly not going to be able to put as much time into that because you've got other people to knit for. But I think it's very easy, even at other times of the year as well, to give yourself less, if that makes sense. So if you're working on a very special project for somebody else, or this is how my mind works anyway, I want to be absolutely sure that I am using the right yarn and I'm using something quite special for them if I'm going to be using hand-dyed yarn, for example. But when it comes to me, I think I'm a little bit, I don't always think that I'm worth using fantastic yarn for, and this project is really quite indulgent for me because this is the first project, let me just think about this. Yes, this is the first project that I have knitted for myself, which is going to use 2 whole skeins of beautiful hand-dyed yarn. So I wanted to show you that because it is the first project that I'm doing that in. I'm trying to think now. Yeah, it is, because I think I've done, have I done a project where I've used 1 single skein? Yes, I have done a single skein project before, but I haven't used 2. So it feels incredibly indulgent and it feels incredibly special, and I'm going to really enjoy it, and I'm going to enjoy it all the more for knitting along with a lovely knitty friend as well. So I just wanted to show you that because, again, it kind of follows the theme of knitting for others versus knitting for ourselves. I think sometimes we forget that we are as important as anybody else, and that we should be able to use our crafting to make beautiful things. I'm going to hold it up there because and I look like Princess Leia from Star Wars. Honestly, just because of the sun. But yeah, so I'm really enjoying what I've done so far, and I'm really looking forward to being able to see how that knits up. So I am not going to put the Rogue stitch markers back into the project bag, but I am going to put the pattern into it. Right, the other thing that I was going to talk to you about is I am knitting on a couple of garments at the moment. I'm knitting on the Georgie sweater and I'm knitting on the gingerbread sweater, both of which are by Libby Jonson, Truly Myrtle, and I talked about those quite a bit last time, so I'm not going to show you those again today. But I mentioned last time briefly my Zweig because I'd fallen out of love with it, and I was supposed to be doing it as part of the Time to Zweig knit along, which I'm going to talk about again later because I've got some prizes to give out for that. And I originally intended, in the last episode, I intended to continue with the grey baby alpaca silk yarn that I was using and just change out the contrast colour. But then I had a little think about what I wanted to do, and again, along the lines of how carefully would I think about a project for me and how carefully would I think about a project for someone else. I thought, no, if this project is going to be something that I'm going to enjoy wearing, I need to think about what I really want in terms of colour. I'm not just going to use something that's in my stash because it's there and I feel that I should use it. I'm going to get something that I want. So I bought some yarn, but I've bought commercial yarn. I've not bought hand-dyed yarn, again because it's a, it's a garment and it's going to take a lot of yarn. So let me just get the yarn over here. So I had a little look at Drops yarn again because I knew that I wanted to use a natural fibre because I am somebody that always gets cold and I wanted something that was going to keep me warm. And my plan is to knit on this over the Christmas period. I'm not going to finish it over Christmas, but it was going to be a really nice kind of cosy knit that and I want to knit on through that time that's, we all want to be wrapped up and cosy. So I wanted to use something that had an alpaca content because alpaca is quite woolly and it's also very warm, and I do like alpaca as a fibre, I do. So I had a look at the Drops alpaca, which I think is just called Drops alpaca, but the colours that they had in that, there was nothing that really appealed to me in terms of a main colour and a contrast. I liked things, I liked standalone colours, but there wasn't anything that appealed as a contrast. So then I had a look at the Drops Nord because a lot of people knit jumpers in sock yarn or sweaters or garments in sock yarn. And I decided that I was going to do the main body of my Zweig this is called Navy and it's colour 15. And this is what I'm using for the contrast colour for Stephen's socks. So that's my main colour. And as my contrast colour, this is a colour that I love, and I always, if I've bought fabric in this colour, I've bought commercial yarn in this colour, I've bought acrylic yarn in this colour, I've never bought any hand-dyed yarn in this colour. I really like this colour. I use this colour in my home, but for the life of me, it just doesn't really suit me. But because I love it so much, and because it's only going to have a little bit of it and it's going to be tinged with this, and I think it goes really, really well with this, and I love the colour, this is what I've gone for. So it's coming out ever so slightly richer, I would say, than it is in real life. And this is Goldenrod. And it's a mustard yellow. It's not too bright, but it's like a golden mustard yellow. And I think I'm going to put another ball of the Nord. I think as a contrast with that, it's going to be fine. It's going to be really, really nice. So that's what I'm planning to do. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do, so the Zweig, for those of you that don't know, it's top down yoked sweater. It has the main colour, then it has a little bit of colour work in a contrast colour, then it has a lace panel in the contrast colour, and then it has a little bit of colour work in the contrast colour and the main colour again. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do the lace panel in this colour as well, or whether I'm going to do the lace panel in this colour and I'm just going to use this for contrast for the colour work. Haven't decided. I'm tempted to just use that for the colour work, to be honest, but then I don't know if I've got enough navy yarn. But then what I could do is I could stripe this on the hem and on the cuffs, couldn't I? Anyway, those are the colours that will be used in my Zweig. And that has had the effect that I wanted it to have, actually, in the sense that it's kind of, it's reawakened, it's re-motivated, it's re-excited me about knitting the Zweig. So I'm really, really pleased about that. So that is all of my projects that I'm going to talk about for this episode. So let's move on to the next section. And to move on to the next section, I'm going to stop recording again and start recording again because I've waffled on for a long time. Okay, on to the next section. The light is still a bit iffy here, but yeah, anyway, look at you knitting, don't look at me. So I was calling this What's on My Mind, but as I've been filming this, it's occurred to me that maybe it's better to call this section Let's Talk About. So let's talk about patterns. Patterns is my talk topic for today. Now, I wanted to clear something up from the last episode, really. I don't think I said anything particularly within the last episode that suggested that I thought that pattern designers didn't do a very good job. And that's not what I think at all. But I think that perhaps I should have said more to make it clear that that isn't what I meant at all. So I have talked on here about patterns which are well written and easy to follow. And if I'm following a pattern and I struggle with something, I always feel that I should tell you because you might want to know. And obviously there's only so much that I can say, because with paid for patterns, it's not great, is it, to be, dictating the contents of a pattern on the podcast. But what I would say is that if ever I struggle with an element of a pattern, I don't ever see it as a fault of the pattern. I see it as a fault of my knitting, as a demonstration of my knitting inexperience, and I treat it as an opportunity to learn. And it may be that I go onto YouTube and look up a tutorial, or it may be that I ask one of my crafting friends on social media, or it might be that I go and see if I can find something in a book, and I try and learn and try and build my skills in that way. So if ever I come on the podcast and I tell you about a pattern that I have followed and something that I have struggled with within the pattern, I am not telling you that because I think it's a fault of the pattern, or because I think that the pattern is badly written, or because I think that there is something wrong with the pattern. If there is a mistake in a pattern, i.e. if there is a typographical error, then that is slightly different. And in those scenarios, then the right thing to do, obviously, would be, yes, to let you know, because if you're following the same pattern, then you need to know that, but also to let the designer know, because they want to know if there's a typographical error. I have written patterns myself in which there are typographical errors, and sometimes they're picked up in testing and sometimes they're not. So just to be completely clear, if I struggle with a pattern, if I think a pattern is unclear, I don't see it as a fault of the pattern. I see it as a demonstration of my knitting inexperience, or as a fault in my knitting, and it's something that I can learn from. And I want to be honest with you about that, because if you are somebody who is less experienced than me, as experienced as me, more experienced than me, whatever, I think that it's helpful to know if there are certain things in that pattern which you might be a little bit unclear about, because then you'll expect that when you come to it in the pattern, and hopefully you won't panic and you'll be able to, go onto YouTube and find your way out of it. So that's the first point. Having said all of that, it got me to thinking, well, I do have a bit of a, when I write my patterns, I do have a bit of a criteria, which is that I want to make my patterns as clear as possible. And just because I think something is clear, it doesn't mean that somebody else is necessarily going to think it's clear. And that's why I try to have a wide pool of test knitters, so that different people with different approaches and different brains that learn in different ways can try my patterns and give me the feedback, because it's really important to me to have that feedback. And I think part of the reason that I make them clear, but they become very long, because, you're watching this podcast, you know that if I can say something in one word, I'll say it in 10. That's just the way that I am. And so my patterns become a little bit like that. And so, for example, my sock patterns are 18 pages long. That's partly because they are detailed, but it's also partly because I include instructions for a toe-up construction and a cuff-down construction, and I write everything out in full. I don't just say refer back to this. So when you have one of my patterns, you don't necessarily need to print out all of the pages of the pattern, but it is all there if you want to use it. You may not print out any of the pages of the pattern if you're following it on an iPad or something. But the point that I'm trying to make is, I think the reason that I do this is because of my own knitting pattern journey, in the sense of the patterns that I used when I was learning to knit and when I got back into knitting. And I thought it might be quite interesting to show you some of the patterns that I have had experience of using. Now, before I go into the details of the patterns, let me just show you. This is one folder. This is another folder. That's not all. Then I have these, and this, and that's just a little bag full of things. I have this, so I have a lot of patterns, and these are all the patterns that I kind of grew up on in knitting terms. Although I've only been knitting seriously for about the last 2.5 years, I did learn to knit as a child. It was quite frustrating. I'm left-handed, and I do remember my mum always saying to me that she couldn't show me something because everything was the wrong way around, but I'm a right-handed knitter. Anyway, doesn't matter. But these are the patterns that I grew up on, and these are the patterns that I remember her having. And these are patterns that I have collected over the years through my kind of knitting. Some of them I've got from charity shops, some of them I've bought on eBay, some of them have just come to me from other people who know that I like to knit, and you know, it usually ends up being, you know, if somebody's having a clear out, no, do you want these knitting patterns? So these have kind of come together over a period of time, and I'm probably never going to knit most of these patterns because, you know, I don't have enough time for a start, but I love having them because they really demonstrate to me the kind of the history of the knitting pattern, and there is something in them of the tradition of knitting, and they hold a certain nostalgia for me because certainly some of these patterns are garments that I have had knitted for me, or they're garments that my mum knitted for herself and wore, and they have a particular, that there are particular memories around them for me. And certainly some of them, whilst they're not my mum's patterns, because she, to my knowledge, still has those patterns, some of them are the same patterns as she had in her collection when I was younger, and I used to go through her books and look at these patterns. So I thought I would just show you a few of them, just for you to see the kind of thing that I, let's go for this one first, that I kind of grew up with in terms of my knitting. I'm going to see if I can find one that I actually recognise. Yeah, so this is quite a good one. So things like this, so school cardigans. So when I was growing up and I went to school, I remember my nana, my maternal grandmother, knitting our school jumpers and cardigans for us. I remember having a maroony coloured one. I think I had a navy one knitted for me as well. My dad was in the RAF, so we moved about quite a lot, so I went to a number of different primary schools, and I remember having jumpers and things knitted for me. And I mean, you can see from that is definitely a school cardigan pattern, and it's quite an old one as well. But if I show you here, and it's also, it's got your old pounds, shillings and pence notation on here. But if I just show you, without showing you what the actual pattern is. So you have your picture on the front, then on the first page inside, you've got your sizing and your yarn information and your needle weights and stuff. The actual pattern itself, bearing in mind that this is for a garment that has 3 sizes in it, and it's a cardigan which is knitted in pieces, that, and now I can't turn the page, and that little bit there, because this is your making up instructions, that is your pattern. Now, as somebody who was always a bit thick when it came to knitting, it didn't come naturally to me. It's taken a long time for my brain to work in the right way when it comes to knitting. What am I going to do with that? I'm never going to be able to do it. And it says things like, I'm trying to find an example. Let's see. Here we go. Continue decreasing at armhole edge as before on second row following, and every following fourth row. At the same time, continue decreasing 1 stitch at front edge on next and every following fifth row until X number of stitches remain, every fourth row until X number of stitches remain. What? I mean, whether you're a knitter or not, can anybody's brain actually compute that? Can any parent of a 5-year-old child's brain compute that? Can any person with any other things going on in their life other than knitting actually compute and understand what that means? So that's where I've come from in terms of knitting patterns. And until 2.5 years ago, when I came back to knitting, and in fact, really, I suppose until about 2 years ago, because originally I was still looking at these kind of patterns and trying to, make head or tail of them really. Until 2 years ago, that is the kind of knitting patterns that I had access to and thought existed. I didn't really have any idea that, modern independent patterns existed, or even that modern, things like Rowan patterns, for example, existed. So this is where I've come from. And I mean, there are some absolutely beautiful things in here. And I mean, the photographs of, let me see if I can find some for you. I mean, look at this one. This is a really old one. But look at this, things like this. Look at these beautiful hand knitted garments. And I'm probably never going to knit any of these things. And this is a collection really, in the sense of I keep it because I enjoy looking through it, and it gives me ideas in terms of design and ideas for things that I want to look at. I mean, goodness me, look at this. I mean, it's beautiful, but how I would ever be able to follow that pattern is beyond me. So, coming from somewhere like this is why when I find a pattern that is really, really, really well written, I just get so excited about it. And that's why I got really, excited about the Truly Myrtle patterns in the last episode. I mean, this is lovely, isn't it? Because it just makes everything so much easier for me. Lovely photographs. Really, really lovely. I've got so many of these now that I don't know where to go next with you, really. I also have a book. Now this is definitely the knitting of my childhood. This is the family knitting book, which was done by W.H. Smith's, which is still a shop in existence here. And look, it's even got a tape measure down the front of the book jacket. And this has got patterns in for the whole family, and some of the patterns in here I do remember my mum having. I remember my mum having that jumper or something very, very like it. I don't think she had the neck, but she certainly had a jumper with a similar pattern that looks like feather and fan lace, to be honest. I mean, look at these things. Would you ever? But yeah, I do loopy knitting in more than one sense, potentially. But yeah, I do remember seeing a lot of these patterns. In fact, this little girl I remember seeing in a number of my mum's knitting patterns. And again, these patterns are all kind of written in the same way, really. I do love baby patterns, and I have a particular kind of fondness for these, really. I remember my mum having that pattern, because I think this is like a sort of a collection of, these are all Wendy patterns, I think, and she did have a lot of Wendy knitting patterns. Oh, and then all these wonderful Aran sweaters, which I would love to knit. And you know, maybe one day I will, when my knitting comes up to a good enough standard that I'm able to do these things. But this is my knitting, I don't know, knitting heritage, I suppose. This is what I grew up on. And because I never thought that I would be able to knit a garment, and now have, because I thought that I would never be able to knit socks, it just seemed like the kind of, you know, knitting was this, my mum had this pattern as well, knitting was this kind of holy grail, you know, that I would never be able to do. And it left me feeling that knitting was just not my thing, and I wasn't meant to be a knitter, and I couldn't do it, and you know, so I'd done sewing for a long time, and so that was going to be the thing that I did. So there's another one here. But there are an awful lot of really good modern patterns out there now, and I've not knitted, you know, a great number of them, and I can only kind of comment on the ones that I have encountered, and I'm sure that as I continue my knitting journey I will encounter lots more wonderful patterns that I can share with all of you. And I think that's what's great about this community, is that we can have this discussion and we can be honest with each other, and we can give not so much a review, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm not looking at patterns and saying, oh, this is a good pattern or this is a bad pattern, but just to kind of look at them and, you know, at the end of them, maybe analyse what I've found easy when knitting that pattern, what I struggled with when knitting that pattern, and what I've learnt from that pattern, because I do feel that the patterns that I have knitted I've learnt a lot from. I think I talked in my second episode about I was knitting the Country Garden mittens by Ellie from Craft House Magic, and I remember saying how much I'd learned from that pattern. That was the first time that I'd knitted with DPNs, and it was the first time that I'd used a pattern and I'd felt that I'd learnt a lot from it, really, and it really did help extend my knitting skills. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those mittens in the next section in a minute. But yeah, that's kind of, you know, that's my knitting heritage and my knitting history. I've got loads and loads of these patterns, but I enjoy them. I enjoy looking at them. It's almost like, you know, if you have a kind of a book, like a pattern reference book, and it's like a fashion reference book rather, and it's like showing you kind of styles through the years, because I mean there are some patterns here that I think go back to probably pre-Second World War. Yeah, some really lovely patterns. This, very glamorous. So I enjoy looking through those, and like I say, probably never going to knit them, but it's lovely to have them, and it's lovely to look through them. So that is my what's on my mind, let's talk about section. On to sharing the love, and actually the mittens leads me nicely onto this. So I knitted the Country Garden fingerless mitts for myself and enjoyed wearing them and loved them very much, and still do. But at the moment, we're in lockdown here in the UK at the moment, but shortly before that, we were able to meet up with people from another household, but only outside. So my husband arranged to go to the pub with a friend of his one evening, and they had to sit outside. And he decided to take my mittens with him, and came back and decided that they were the best thing he'd ever discovered, and has now purloined them for himself. So Ellie, if you're watching, it's a great unisex pattern, clearly. And my husband, who never appreciates anything that I make him, really, because he always finds something wrong with it. He does appreciate it, but he always finds something to complain about within it. He loves them. So I have very kindly said that he can keep those, and I will knit another pair for myself at some point. But at the moment, I don't have the time to do that because I've got a few other things going on. So I decided that I was going to treat myself to some new fingerless mittens, and I did that on Etsy. And these, can I just show you that? So this is Alison from Oopsie Daisy Crochet, And I did have her card and things in a box here, but I've sorted out over the weekend and now I've misplaced it. So I'll pop her details in the description box below. But these are crocheted fingerless mittens. Let me just pop them on for you. Now, I was going to say, in the words of Ali from Little Drops of Wonderful, I have freakishly small hands. No, I don't have freakishly small hands, but I do have freakishly narrow hands. Now, they're not freakishly narrow because they're not narrower than other people's hands, but in comparison to the rest of me, because there is a lot of width going on my thighs, I do have really quite narrow wrists. And what I have found with mittens before, fingerless mittens, is that on the cuff they tend to sort of slip about a bit. So she had two different sizes in her shop, so I went for the smaller of the two, and I'm really pleased with them, and they just keep my hands so warm. When I'm taking Eloise to school in the mornings, I tend to have hold of her hand, and it just keeps your hand warm. Here, it's really lovely. So I've really enjoyed wearing those. So Alison has an Etsy shop, so if you are in the market for some beautifully crocheted accessories, then go and check her shop out. I think she prices things very, very reasonably. I know how much work goes into handmade things like this, and I would say that the quality is fantastic. Lovely little button, and when she packaged it all up, she included this in the package as well, which is going to have pride of place on my Christmas tree. We are going to have 2 Christmas trees again this year. We were only going to get one because my dad and my stepmom were supposed to be coming over from Cyprus to spend Christmas with us and would have been using the front living room where we normally have one of our trees, but they're not able to come. The flights have been cancelled because of coronavirus. I'm not going to talk about that a lot because I'm quite upset about that. But anyway, they're not coming. So we are going to have 2 trees again this year. And last year, the tree that we had in the kitchen, we had a real tree, and I hung everything on it was handmade. So that is going to go onto that Christmas tree this year. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So yeah, check Alison out if you are in the market for some lovely accessories. Very speedy delivery as well. Right, what else was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about some yarn that I have, I was going to say acquired, but let's just say bought, shall we? So I did mention Shannon from Blue Fern Yarns on my last episode, and I was having a look through the colours on her website, and I can't show you one of the things that I've bought because it is a gift for somebody who probably will be watching this podcast. So I'm not going to show you that one, but you know how it is. You're online and you're looking and you think, yeah, I'm going to have that skein for my friend, and then, oh, let's have something for myself. So what I got was, I got 2 skeins of this, which is called Mint Kisses, and it's not coming out, I would say it's coming out more grey on the screen, but it is very, very definitely a beautiful pale minty green. So I got 2 skeins of that, and the reason that I got that is because I want to put it into the Timely cardigan, which is a truly myrtle pattern, and it's a cardigan which is striped, and I want to stripe it with this, which is Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit, and it is turquoise flecked with picot speckles. So that is my colour combination. I've got 2 skeins of this as well. So that's going to be my cardigan stripes, because it's a nice little cardigan which is designed not to fasten but to just sit nicely back. So if I was wearing dresses or sleeveless tops, for example, which I do tend to wear a lot of, particularly in the spring and summer, then I would just have a little cardigan to pop over the top. So yeah, so that's Shannon's yarns. She's got some lovely colours on her website, and as I say, I can't show you the other one, which is a shame because it's beautiful, but maybe I have got a photograph of it, so maybe, although to be honest, once the recipient has it, I'm sure she'll show you herself because she's a podcaster. So I won't show you that at the moment. And then the other yarn that I wanted to share with you, again, I ordered 2 things. One is a gift, so I'm not going to show you, from lovely Michelle at Wild Rose Yarn, and the label has just come off the ball, so let me just hold it round there. So this is Michelle, who is Wild Rose yarn, and this is called Winter's Eve, and it came with a lovely little bell, progress keeper. And I really liked this because it reminds me of the colours in Frozen. So Elsa's colours are the turquoise and then Anna's colours are the purple. So I might make Eloise some socks out of this. I'll definitely get a pair of socks for me out of it, and then I might make a pair of socks for her as well and call them her Frozen socks. So yeah, so those are the kind of the makers, the creators, the dyers that I wanted to share the love for. And I also wanted to share a little bit of love for two other podcasters, one of whom is new to me since the last episode, and the other one is, I've watched a few of her episodes now, but she is also relatively new podcaster. So first of all, Stacey, who is Stacey J. Lou, I think, on Instagram, and her YouTube channel is Stacey Parker. She is very good friends with Cherie from Ollie and Bella, and she has just started a podcast, and she does tend to do them a lot more regularly than I do, and it's just lovely to see all of her projects. So go and check Stacey out. Very, very organised podcast as well, unlike mine often. And the other podcaster that I have found is Helen from Stitch with Sprite 966. And again, I will pop links in the description box below and put some details up on the screen. I became aware of Helen because I joined in with Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted this year. I'm not going to go into details about what that is just now. I'll talk about that again in a minute, but she granted one of my yarn wishes, and then as a result of that I realised that she has a podcast. She is a Scottish lady and she does so much crafting, and I think she tends to do monthly podcasts, and they're absolutely full of projects, and she's really good company actually if you're knitting along. So go and check Helen out as well. So let's move on to the Ask a Question section, and it's going to be a little bit different this week because I would like to ask you a question. I'm just going to pause recording and then I'll come back. Okay, so ask a question. I'm going to ask you a question this week. So, as I just mentioned, I have taken part in Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted this year. So there is a hashtag on Instagram called Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted 2020, and the idea is that people post their yarn wishes up. So it might be that they want some sock yarn or some minis or some scraps or a particular needle or a project bag or some stitch markers. And you look through the hashtag and you work out whose wishes you can grant. Some people just want a pattern from their Ravelry wish list, for example. And then you decide, right, I'm going to send that person a pattern from their Ravelry wish list, or I'm going to send some yarn to this person. And once you've done that, you can post your own yarn wishes up. So I had a look through and I granted a couple of wishes, and I sent out, I did some Ravelry patterns, but then I also sent out a project bag to a lovely lady, and I posted my wishes up, and I have been lucky enough to have mine, one of my wishes granted by 3 different people. So I put up that I wanted some mini skeins, and 3 very lovely, kind and generous people granted those wishes. So thank you so much. I'm so appreciative, and it's just, honestly, they're absolutely beautiful minis. Thank you. But as a result of doing that, I've been wanting to make some more project bags for my shop. And then I decided that I was going to wait until the new year, but I've decided to do a few Christmas ones now. But I was thinking that, you know, a lot of the time we might like to have a new project bag, but, you know, particularly at this time of year, we can't always justify that because, you know, there's a lot of expense. But one thing that we crafters have a lot of, I can't even speak. One thing that we crafters have a lot of is stash. And, you know, there are de-stashes going on all the time, there are swaps going on all the time, because, you know, we're never going to knit through all of our stash, and we also like to share things with people. So I have had an idea, and I want to ask you if you think it is a good idea, and whether it's something that you would be interested in doing, or whether it's a terrible idea and I should just forget the whole thing. So this is just an idea which is being developed at the moment. So I have got, I'll show you these project bags that I've got here. These ones are not for this purpose, but so this is the size of project bag. I haven't put the drawstring in this one yet, but this is the size of project bag that there will be, and that, you know, they are quite large. They've got a box bottom. I would happily use this for a sweater knit, lining and a drawstring. So you've got a bottom which corresponds or coordinates in some way with the drawstring channel, and then a print on there. And then I've got another one here which is slightly different. This is just got a plain fabric. So you can see they're fairly roomy, substantial bags. So I'm going to make some Christmas ones to pop in the shop, and I'm going to show you, these are not put together properly yet, but I have put together some of the front panels, so let's just show you. So I've got this one, which is reindeers with that one on the bottom there, and then I've also got, let's show you this one next, this one, which is very cheeky Christmas mice with polka dots. And then I've also got, if you are somebody that doesn't celebrate Christmas but you still want to be a little bit wintry, then there is this one here. So that's, the colour's not coming up very well on there. It's a really rich but also quite bright green and navy blue. So I've got those, and I'm going to make those up and I'm going to list those in my shop. But what I thought it might also be nice to do is to make some up to do a project bag swap. So the bags will be that size because that's the size that has been cut out. So, you know, a reasonably large bag. And I haven't done my kind of my final costings for the shop yet. So I don't know exactly how much they will go in for. But what I was thinking was I could make some up for a swap, and if you would like to have a project bag and you would like to swap a project bag for some hand-dyed yarn from your stash, then we can do that. Now, I could do that for a couple of Christmas bags. I could wait until the new year to do it as a bit of a new year kind of pick-me-up thing. I could not do it at all. I could not put any bags in my shop and just do a swap. Yeah, and in terms of the amount of yarn, I don't know really. This is why I was saying about pricing. You know, if they were to go in the shop, they're quite large bags. You know how much roughly people charge for a large project bag. So I'm saying hand-dyed yarn rather than, you know, commercial yarn, because I think, you know, that's something that we tend to swap more, isn't it? Hand-dyed yarn. And I'm happy to swap full skeins or minis. It's difficult. I don't know. Maybe at least 100 grams would be, I don't know, as much or as little as you want. I don't know. Anyway, that's my question to you. Is that something that you think is a good idea? I just thought it may make things a little bit more accessible for people, because I know myself, you know, when you do a swap, you can't always afford financially to kind of purchase new things, but you can afford to swap to get something with people. And, you know, they're not used project bags that I've used for projects. They are all brand new. So let me know what you think. So let's move on. We are coming to the end. If you're still here, well done, thank you. Excuse me, I have talked a lot today. My husband, who is working at home in the office, which is part of our garage that we converted, has been in once and said, "Are you nearly finished? You've been doing this for a very long time, you know." And I know I have. But anyway, prizes. So we have had the Time to Zweig knit along going on between Kathy of the Whatnot podcast and I, and Kathy drew 2 winners from the Instagram hashtag on her podcast, and I said that I would draw 2 winners from the Ravelry thread on my podcast. However, having been into the Ravelry thread, there were 5 people who had joined in and knitted a Zweig all together. And 2 of those have been selected by Kathy. So there were only 3 people left. So I've decided that I'm going to give 3 prizes because I don't think it's fair to just leave one person out. So Marie, who is Cozy Stitches, and let's have a look. I don't know how to say your username, but Kiko, I think I'm right in saying, is your name, and your username is KeyKnitCo, so you've put knit in the middle of Kiko, and D Massey, who is Diane. All 3 of you will be getting a prize. Now, I might not post these out for a few weeks because I've got the Christmas gift smell, which finishes at the end of this month, and I think I would rather go out to the post office with everything all together because of the current situation with COVID. But you will all be getting a project bag like this. So you can use it for another garment project, or if you haven't quite finished your Zweig yet, maybe you can use it to finish off. So I've got 2 here which I haven't put the drawstring which I haven't put the drawstrings in yet, and I will make another one up which will have a different lining fabric because I don't have any of that fabric left. But ladies, I will be sending one of those to each of you, and I'm pretty sure that I'll be popping some stitch markers and progress keepers in there as well. So if you could all get in touch with me either on Instagram or on Ravelry, send me a message in one of those 2 ways, and I will arrange to send those out to you either at the beginning of next month or at the end of this month. So that's Marie and Kiko and Diane. If you could all get in touch with me, please, and let me have your details, and I will get those out to you. The Christmas Gift Smell 2020 is still going on. There are lots of you posting lovely items in the finished object thread there. Angela from the Knitting on the Farm podcast also has a finished object thread. The idea was that you post knitting and crochet and yarn things in her thread and sewing and everything else in my thread. I know there is, I think there's a couple of people who've posted knitting or crochet FOs in my thread, and that's fine. You'll still be entered into the draw. It doesn't matter. It was just to have 2 different threads because we were running it together, so that's fine. So I will be drawing winners from that. If you haven't entered yet, there is still time to do so. It's running until the 25th of November. And I am, sorry, there was a bird very close to my window there which distracted me. I will be drawing winners for those. I have got the prizes already. I've got a beautiful little bear from Paula at Stitched by Mrs. D, and I have a lovely mermaid from Anna Maria, who is the little creative sheep. I think that's right. So yeah, I have got those prizes, and that, I think, brings me to the end of things. I've just written AOB on my notepad, and I've actually written nothing next to it because I don't think I've got anything else to talk about today, really. I am working on some more designs. I've got a shawl design which is in my head at the moment, but I can tell you that it's going to be a textured shawl. I think I'm probably not going to put any lace into it. It's going to be more about texture. And I'm really looking forward to having a go at that next week. I've got a rug in my room just over here that I'm looking at, which has a pattern on it. It's 2 different colours, and it has a pattern on it, and they're kind of like geometric, and that's basically what has inspired me to come up with this shawl design. So I'm hoping to get that done. Yeah, I don't know whether I'll start that this year or whether I'll leave it till the new year. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by lots of things at the moment, so I'm trying to use my crafting more as a therapy to relax me rather than being stressed out and just kind of working on designs and things. But they will be coming, and I am still enjoying it, and I am going to carry on doing it. But I think, yeah, just my frame of mind over the last few weeks, and the fact that we're leading into Christmas, which is always a busy time for everybody, isn't it? It's taken my eye off the design things a little bit, but my sock pattern will be coming out later this week, so keep your eyes open for that if you are interested. Thank you very much for watching. I think it has been a bit of a long one looking at the time I've been recording for, sorry. But you know, maybe I will have kept you company through some nice knitting or crochet or whatever project it is you're working on. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you again next time. I hope it's not going to be as long before the next episode. I am aware that I still haven't put my 1,000 subscriber giveaway together, but again, as I said, I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed at the moment, so that will be done, and yeah, that will be coming. So I will see you all next time. In the meantime, happy knitting, stay safe and well, and thank you for watching. Bye.